public and board members can see, because I know we're virtual. So, and I know you have these, I know everyone have this in civic code backgrounds too. So this process is a very important process as a result of our year-end close activities, which I briefed the board on yesterday, were outstanding once again. Thanks again to all the staff, not just the accounting staff too, but I was remiss. I should have thanked all the section staff too for working so closely with the accounting staff to get to what right is with our closing packet, which, I gave you a summary of that, the board a summary of that yesterday. So with the background piece to it, I want to make sure that the public and the committee members are clear going into this particular item, that what you're seeing or what's presented to you are balances or carry forward balances above $100,000. There are other programmatic carry forward balances, but they're less than $100,000. The reason why we do that is you can see how complex this process is, but how necessary it is that the board be involved in all things public finance, right? And that you as the finance committee make recommendations to the board on how best to allocate the leftover balances or carry forward balances from the results of every year's year-end close, and now specifically 2024. So I just wanted to tee that up and make sure that you and the public know that what you're about to see from each one of the sections is proposed plans to the finance committee for review, and then subsequently at your direction, at your behest, whatever you want to recommend to the board, whatever actions you deem necessary coming out of this. We do have it captured. This is another just kind of process type briefing that I'm giving you. If you'll take a look at the recommended action, we have just one recommended action, right? As you go through, or you see particular sections, or if you have questions or concerns with any of the proposed plans, please let us know. Please ask those questions. We're all familiar with the parliamentary procedures, those types of things, but the end state for this particular agenda item is that recommended action to the board that the finance committee recommend the plans that for expenditure of balances that are above $100,000. So with that, if we could go ahead and and one other thing too, just as we did yesterday in the monthly budget report, you can see that we did also put in the financial closeout presentation here. So I know that's a duplicate, but we wanted to make sure that you can see the closeout, and the public, if they missed board meeting yesterday in the monthly budget report, that you can see the same presentation is available here too, on the closeout, how we're bringing in all the different program areas. So that ultimately results in where we're at right now with these balances above $100,000 that we're proposing to the finance. All right. So Chair Norton, at your direction, go ahead. Well, go ahead, Cammie, and open up the carry forward spend plans.
Can you see that, sir?
I still see the slide presentation. I don't know.
Well, this is the carry forward one. They look very similar. Can you see that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, you
okay.
did. Okay, I missed it. I missed the flip. Sorry. Yep.
No, you're fine.
Yep. Let's go down. Okay. I pretty much gave the overview of the carry forward. Go. So next slide. Yeah. So here's our agenda, if you will, within this presentation, within this agenda item. And I pretty much covered this already, but we'll just pause here and see if there's any lack of consistency with what I said compared to what you're reading and seeing here. Please let me know. Okay, next slide. So then here are our USBE closing balances for your review, leading into the process and ultimately your recommendations, if any. Okay, next slide. So first up is the assessment and accountability section presentation. There's representatives, staff are here. It may be that a couple of other staff members are coming in because, they were tracking that it was the third item. So, but I'm sure we can answer any questions or concerns. So there's a couple of ways we've done this in the past. You recall last year, we can go section by section, proposed plan by proposed plans, within those. Or, we can give time to the committee members, if they haven't had enough time yet to look through these and to do it. It's really at your direction, ma'am. I can go through section by section, or if maybe some of the committee members have already had a chance to review them and they're ready and loaded with questions on any of them. It's really up to you and at your direction, ma'am, on how you want to proceed, section by section, plan by plan within those.
Okay. I do have a question that was sent into me
Oh.
by a committee member from, from a board member that's not part of our committee. Would you mind if I ask that question
Yeah, no.
now? And
Yeah, please,
maybe
ma'am.
it would help
Sure.
everyone that might be listening in. This is from Vice Chair Jenny Earl. She says, just in general, I understand some carry forward funds, but how do we better estimate actual department costs? And then she has a follow-up question. Do you want to answer that one first?
Yeah, so if I understand the correct question correctly, if I understand what she's saying, how we estimate. I think how we estimate section costs or do it is part of the initial budget process. So when we go to set the next fiscal year budget with the sections, I mean, obviously there's the flow through money, right, that goes out to the LEAs. That's all part of Dale and Sam's process of constructing what we call the legislative estimates.
Which I understand is the majority of our budget.
Right, yeah, so this money here is all the money by section, right, that's in the board's budget. It's not, well, so there is some flow through, but most of it, this is money that stays quote unquote within that too. So if I understand what her question is, the sections estimate their expenses and their costs at the beginning of the year or the budget process. As we progress, we reconcile and see what our spending rate is and all that. I think what her concern or question is, well, how do we get to the point though that we end up with carry forward balances, right? Could we, be tighter in the estimates and things like that? The answer is yes. And actually over the years, we can demonstrate that we have really actually tightened things up very well to where if you were to compare how much in carry forward we have this year compared to say 19, 18, it's much smaller. There is carry forward balances, but inevitably what we do end up with is because there's things we can't control. So like within a section, say if there's a lot of vacancies over there, attrition rates high, our attrition rates have been low, so that's helped a lot too. But what I'm saying is our section leaders or our directors, our director of assessment and accountability, Darren, they do a really good job of setting up or estimating their budgets. Then what we call in accounting terms, the burn rate, right, is influenced sometimes by things we can't control, vacancies, things like that. If we have a vacant position for 3 months, then if we have 4 or 5 vacant positions, that's going to actually end up giving us a surplus, right? Just as one example. Other examples are the sections do a really good job. Okay, here's, I'm estimating that this contract is that in the first year of this 5-year contract, it's going to cost $500,000, right? Well, it ends up we only get invoiced for $300,000. So then, but that money is encumbered. What we're talking about here is money that is not encumbered. It's left over. It's a surplus, and that's why we take this process. I know I got to get better about giving shorter answers to really good, pointed questions. But that's really what I think she's saying. Overall, we do a pretty good job as a agency in setting our expenditure rates or what we estimate those to be to try to keep our carry forward balances
As small as possible. Okay, then she has a follow-up question. And again, this kind of gets into your last point that there are things that we can't control. And so that's, I think, part of this next question. Also, starting new programs takes more department efforts and time. do we have staff to run these programs when we are asking for more FTEs?
So my answer to that question, and I'll make that short, is no. We have a lot of unfunded mandates. I do want to make sure, though, that my answer is not in any way intended to, point my finger at the legislature or anything like that. It is what it is. We have very, very caring and concerning policymakers that want to do what right is by public education. However, in a lot of cases, we just don't get, the resources we need, or the resources don't trickle down to the LEAs to execute the policies or the intent. So you can see that we do our due diligence, and this ties into later today when we go through the business case or the request for funding and appropriations. We have some critical needs. We have some critical FTEs in the sections. We have those types of things that we really do our best to try to solve our problems in-house, to do those types of things too. Short answer is no, though. We definitely could use some resources in all different areas, not just assessment and accountability, but all the different sections. So.
And on that note, Deputy Superintendent, so this afternoon, when we meet about these critical FTEs, these are not FTEs we think we're going to need for some new something. These are FTEs that we've been doing a program and we've just maxed out every way we can. And we've got to have somebody that we only see growth coming and we're at the limit, kind
Yes,
of
ma'am.
where you're saying.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
And without no disparagement or anything like that. We all know that economics is the allocation of scarce resources. We get economies of scale in our districts and charter schools. Those types of discussions, they're phenomenal discussions and phenomenal people doing more with less, for sure. But yeah, to answer Vice Chair Earl's question, the answer is no. There's definitely a need, not just in our office or money that stays here, but with the flow through money to the districts as well, or in charge.
Okay, thank you. I see a question from Vice Chair Davis. Let's answer our questions, and then, if that leads to additional case by case, that's great. If not, we'll just keep answering questions. So Vice Chair Davis.
Thank you. What percentage of our total fiscal year budget does the 18.9 million represent?
The 18, okay, is this the slide you're looking at?
I think it was that last slide with the assessment and accountability group up at the top.
It says total carry forward in the top right-hand corner. What percent of the total budget is that?
Very small. With let's see, is Sue and Brian in here? Sue and Brian, maybe they can do the quick calculation, but it's a very small percentage of the in-house or USBE budget. I mean, we're hundreds of millions that stay in there. So let's see, probably less than 5%, I would say, in assessment and accountability, their total carry forward.
So may I follow up, Chair?
Of course.
So if it's less than 5%, I think it's important for the public to know that we don't come to a grinding halt at the end of the fiscal year.
Right.
So we don't make an assumption that we're going to be to zero at the end of the fiscal year. I mean, we have monies that are encumbered. We have work that we're doing. We have this fluid agency that doesn't start when we get our first funding and have to get to zero until we start again. So there's always going to be some amount of carry forward. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to folks that we are a living, breathing agency that's constantly working, and it's never going to be like a zero-sum game. It's, there's always going to be work in progress and monies that will have a small amount of carry forward.
So it might be a value add at this time, and it gives me an opportunity to basically call Darren on this. Is he here with us or anybody from assessment and accountability? They might have thought that
Don't know that I've seen him.
okay, all right. Yeah, so I can get that percentage to you, but Vice Chair Davis is right. I mean, we keep moving and we keep going. So just to orient you to how these are presented, so
And
that's.
actually, can I,
yeah, go
Deputy
ahead.
Jones, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't even need it just specifically for assessment and
Okay.
accountability. I'm really just curious overall for the whole agency. What percent are we carrying forward?
Yeah, let's go back to that first slide. And then let me ask Sue and Brian to go ahead and try to calculate that, because I see what you're saying. So right now, what we're discussing is $311,639,015 of total unencumbered carried forward. And that's how it's broken out, in these categories here in the pie chart, right? But I don't have the actual percentage of the overall FY24 in-house or office budget, if you will. So,
And I can get it offline later
Oh,
too, just as a
okay,
point
yeah.
of
So-
interest.
so I-
We can continue, thanks.
yeah, I'll task Sue and Brian to do that.
May I?
Oh, maybe Sue's ready, Chair Norton.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Our annual FY24 expenditure is 6.4 billion just for perspective of 311. We can do the math here. We're 6 billion, so it's just very immaterial.
Yeah, Sue, does that, but the 6.4 billion also includes flow through to the LEAs, right? Yeah, I think what Vice Chair Davis is asking is how much of the money that stayed with us that didn't flow through, what percentage is this carried forward balance of the USB office? I mean, that's what if you could get that for us, that'd be good. But I think that's a value add to what Sue said too, Vice Chair Davis, is that, even this amount is just very small and compared to the overall expenditures. We expended over $6 billion of the roughly $8 billion budget, down collectively. But this amount is money that stays, within the office, is my understanding. It's broken out by section. So if we could go back to the assessment and accountability slide, how do you want to proceed, Chair Norton, with these? So go to the next slide, if that's okay.
And I see,
Yeah.
Director, excuse me, Assistant Superintendent Nielsen is on with us.
Oh, great. Great. So, Assistant Superintendent Nielsen, can you just walk for the good of the group through your presentation on assessment and accountability and the projects that you want to use the 18,965,916 for, please?
Yeah. I'm Darren Nielsen, Assistant Superintendent of Student Learning, also serve as the Director of Assessment and Accountability. Thank you for your time and your consideration. I think what you've seen this year, I've been in this position for now coming up on 7 years, and we've realized as much carried forward this year as any prior year. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is in 2020, when we suspended state assessment, we realized some cost savings, and we also had some federal funds. We get a Title 1B state assessment grant. It's non-competitive. Every state gets one to help them administer statewide assessments. There's not a lot of strings on that funding. It's just over $5 million annually. And that helps pay for a number of staff as well as assessment services that are provided through the State Board of Education. But in 2020, when we realized some cost savings, we also weren't able to spend down all of those federal funds. And the U.S. Department of Education gave states an opportunity to submit what's called a tidings waiver, which we did this past year, which brought back money that would have been returned. Well, we had missed the spending deadline on that due to the circumstance of the pandemic. And we were able to recover or reallocate it was just over, I think, $2.2 million from the 2020 fiscal cycle for that federal state Title I-B assessment grant. And so we realized those this year, and we're able to shift some statewide expenses that typically pay for out-of-state budgets against those state or those federal funds. And so we've realized a significant amount of carry forward. There's a few projects, though, that I think are really important for the board to consider in trying to retain some of these carry forward funds for purposes related to assessment and accountability. The PBL Works project, in June, the board signed a contract to with this PBL Works. They're a third party to come in and assist the teaching and learning and assessment accountability teams on this joint project that is underway, which will involve over 100 Utah educators and providing extensive professional development and helping them build out performance-based assessments related to these project-based learning activities, 2 per grade in grades pre-K through 12 in social studies and science. And then that'll create this seed bank of items that teachers can use in their instructional practices. I think it's important to note those performance-based assessments are not designed to be part of the state accountability system. They're designed to support teachers in their work instructing students day to day. There'll be cost to pay for the educators, and so that the funds that I'm asking for that will go basically through us and help compensate educators for their time on this project and travel costs and substitute costs as necessary. We also have been working on a consolidated needs assessment for a number of years. We're getting close to the end of that. We have a contract IT personnel who's in the late stages of finishing that. A part of that $550,000 is me requesting some funds in case there are delays that result in us needing to extend that person's contract. And if so, those funds would go to pay for that. Assessment to Achievement is an initiative that receives ongoing funding, $1 million a year, and we have a number of LEAs and schools that participate in that. And we started another cohort this past year. I think there's close to $1 million in that account. We're recommending that the board retain about half of that to help cover any overruns on costs that would be associated with compensating the schools and the educators. So all of those funds are designed to pay again for substitutes, travel, and teacher compensation when they are performing work outside of the contract day. The adaptive testing license fees, it's been a good practice over the past number of years of carry forward for the board to retain some of those funds to address contract amendments that might come up. Also, there's been some discussion at the most recent education interim committee. There was a discussion item about the high school assessment. My recommendation is the board retain those funds to address any needs that come out from those discussions that would result in contract amendments. And then we always have ongoing development around our items. And with the math standards adoption pending or in the process going forward, once that's completed, we will need to invest money in addition to what's already in the contract. We would recommend the board invest additional money in developing Utah oriented items related to the new math core. The electronic elementary reading, this is the ALO, the Acadience reading and math. Again, we're recommending you keep those funds for any kind of unanticipated expansions in the number of students that are tested. That test we pay, the board pays per test administered. And so again, it's just been good practice in the past. And so I'm continuing to recommend that the board retain those funds specific for that purpose. All of those funds then would be directly linked to the Acadience reading and the Acadience math assessments. And then the college and assessment, we were recommending $60,000 to support to go into, this is a joint project across a number of budgets in the agency to help pay for the artificial intelligence education specialist that we have on staff who's not paid with ongoing funds. And this is our contribution from assessment to that individual's salary. And I'm available for any questions if needed.
Chair, if I could expand or point out on something on that.
Please.
Presentation. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Nielsen. Bottom right-hand corner, 8,159,660. If Finance Committee members in the public will recall, the board yesterday voted to support the Finance Committee's recommendation to provide 3.26 million. Well, or it's already fallen through. So that part of that 3.26 million will get, if you approve this plan, part of it will come out of that 8,159,000. Because in order to provide, so here's where we get into the really, devil in the details, nuances of budget processes and accounting, right? Where the board is directing that we provide 3.26 million of administrative funding to the rural districts. That money has to come from somewhere, and it has to come from a proper place, right? So we can do it, we'll help them, but we're gonna need the legislature to ensure that, or help us reallocate that funding to the right funding codes, right? So that when we distribute it, we track dollar for dollar. So that's just an example of that bottom right-hand one, where part of that money will be coming from. Almost $1 million though of the 3.26 will be coming out of your discretionary funds, which you'll see in the subsequent agenda item. So all that will take place as we move together into the legislative session and get to what right is with, proper allocation that makes it sound that we distribute that money at your directions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I see a hand from Vice Chair Davis.
I guess I don't think I remembered that money has to be reallocated by the legislature out of this particular pot. I'm hearing you say this 8,159,660.
Yeah, about 2.2 million roughly, because you'll see where the other part comes up, because we have to use unrestricted funds. These funds aren't restricted necessarily, they can be used for that because they're carried forward balances. However, when you make the direction, you make your recommendations to the board, if the board follows your recommendations, we have to follow the right and true processes of aligning funds properly to meet your direction for to provide 3.26 million. Especially where we have to find the money, quote unquote. Because remember, the board's direction was prioritized, that was your number one priority was to provide 3.26 million to rural districts for their administrative costs. We made that decision months ago. So now we get to where we know where money is and more money is available. So that's what we're recommending as part of this overall process of how how we can meet your direction. But then subsequently, it means that we have to work with the legislature to get to what right is, that money is properly dispersed from the proper county.
So may I follow up, Chair?
Please.
So did we have authority to make and pass that motion, or is it contingent on agreement by the legislature, or do we have total authority over this money? They just need to code it differently.
You have complete autonomy and authority over this money.
Thank
Through
you.
Chair Norton to Vice Chair Davis's question. It's just that there's other processes that have to take place to ensure proper management and control of the money. For auditing purposes and for, a balanced budget approach that's legally required by the Constitution by the state of Utah.
Sure.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah, no, this is your money. It's just that we also have to rely on the legislature to help us get it aligned properly based on your decision.
Hey, looks like there are no more questions, so you can continue, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Okay, well, so if we can just pause here, I just wanted to and he always does a phenomenal job, have Assistant Superintendent Nielsen brief this one. Now, if you want to go through and do each one with the section representatives, we can do that. Or if you want to just get to each one, and if any members have questions, the staff are available to answer those. I'm not trying to make this fast or furious in any way. I just want to make sure that we, if you feel like it's a value add to follow the same process we just did with Assistant Superintendent Nielsen on each one of the proposals to you, we can do that. Well, that's fine. However you want to proceed.
Let's just open up the conversation, Committee Member Straight and Committee Member Davis. How would it be most effective for you? I don't want to speak for everybody, so,
I don't have a preference.
okay,
So Bam, if you,
okay,
let's go to the next slide.
all right, sounds good.
Yeah, so now this one in particular, so I'll just go through each one, give you the top level, and if you have questions, we can.
Perfect.
Okay, so this one is, we put pending in the upper left-hand corner. Because so in the upper right-hand corner is the carry forward balance from the state charter school board, right? But timing wise, they don't meet with, so now that we've solidified what their balance is, they need to take their balance to their board, right? And they don't meet until after after this month, right? I think they meet later here in September, which my understanding is they will put this in front of their board and then come back to us with, so these are what they're, my understanding is they're gonna propose to their board, but they just haven't had an opportunity to do that. So this one's a little, the timing's off, right? A little bit, so because we honor the state charter school board and their management and control of their budget, of their portion of the overall budget, but, they haven't met yet on this one. Any
Is
questions? Yeah, go
Is
ahead.
there 10% contingency? Is that typical? And is that in line with? I mean, I know they're moving to a new building. They've had some turnover of people, et cetera. How is that in line with what it has been in the past, and has that met their needs?
Well, so I'm not sure if Director Kremer or Marie
Yes,
or.
I
Okay, yeah.
am. Yeah,
Yeah, go
thank you
ahead.
so much.
Yeah.
Did you want me to address that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Yeah.
Well, just thank you for the opportunity to engage with the Finance Committee and for your hard work, and for Deputy Superintendent Jones to accurately characterize where we're at in our process. We have had a chance to work with our Finance Committee, which is a committee, it's a working committee of our full state charter school board. And then this 12th, so next week, Thursday, our full board does meet. As it relates to the contingency amount, 10%, that is something that our state charter school board in full has requested that we try to have some rainy day or some contingency, and it was underscored in the Finance Committee meeting just last week. And so not knowing if that's the right thing or to do something different with that 10% of the overall amount, that is a goal, stated overall goal of our board and then of our Finance Committee.
Okay, when I saw that under administration as opposed to its own separate line item, I just was wondering, was that new or how that worked? But maybe even going forward, it could be something that is as broken out as you have the other three, and then align those funds into that and how they are actually spent rather than just in a general pool there. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Sorry, I was muted. Next slide, please. So here's the CTE, Career and Technical Education proposal to the Finance Committee for your review. Upper right-hand corner, 1,110,466. Blue boxes represent the projects or proposals to use that money on, subject to questions or concerns. Vice Chair Davis,
Yes, Vice Chair Davis.
Sorry, my question was on the last slide with the SCSB, but
Oh, okay, go
my
back.
button wasn't hitting through.
Okay, yeah, I can see Director Kramer's still on here, so. Go ahead. Vice Chair Davis.
You may have already mentioned this, Dr. Kramer, and this is, a casualty of trying to read and listen at the same time. But can you tell us why the sponsoring of the annual conferences are in both of the mentoring and the seminar? Are you just taking a portion out of each of those categories? Is that why they're, okay?
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. And there are unique facets of that professional development, some of it being training and some of it being mentoring. Sometimes it is difficult. They're very close, like those are close cousins, right? The mentoring and the training. And
Sure.
so making good use of the carry forward funds that are available and just kind of dividing out, that's how it landed. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, next slide, back to CTE, please. Okay, are there any questions or concerns with CTE's proposal for the total carry forward? I think Board Member Straight has his hand raised now.
Yes, go ahead, Board Member Straight.
I know that this probably has absolutely nothing to do with our legislative requests, but I noticed there's a CTE request, and there's 3 options in that request, and it makes reference to the year 2017 in that. Could you explain what happened in 2017 that relates to that business case? Because I'm completely ignorant. Or should I wait to answer that later today? Because I know it probably has nothing to do with this here.
So, Madam Chair, I believe Wendy Morton is here from CTE, maybe Talia is, but can we ask that of Wendy?
Yeah, let's do that.
Wendy?
Good morning, Wendy Morton, Career and Technical Education Coordinator. The question around the business case from 2017 was at that time, there was a different value in the WPU for CTE programs and special ed programs compared to the unrestricted WPU value that LEAs received. And in that year, the WPU value was equalized so that there was no difference between the two. And at that point, CTE's number of WPUs were reduced. So the quantity or the number was reduced at that point, and that's tied to the information in the business case. It does not impact these carry forward balances. These carry forward balances are items or expenditures that we do in-house in USB, some of which also flow through to LEAs. But the money in the business case that we mentioned from 2017 is all flow through money to LEAs.
Chair, thank you for allowing me to step off the path.
Thank you. Vice Chair Davis.
Can you give us just a bit more detail on the general financial literacy box on the right-hand side there? Is that, are we working on standards for the financial literacy course, or what was required by the legislature in that space?
So with general financial literacy, there is a requirement to provide some resources to LEAs, as well as some training for teachers. And we have been working and contracting some of that work out with individuals to develop what those resources and what that training might look like. We still have work to do to meet those requirements because there's some elementary through high school requirements. And so it's not 100% complete, and that's the intended use of the remaining funds. Does that answer your question?
Yes, may I follow up, Chair?
Sorry, yes, you bet.
This may be, I hope it's not too far adjacent to this agenda item, but I'm just going to throw in that our USBE Student Advisory Council has made a suggestion that in their financial literacy courses, they learn how to fill out a tax form or how to fill out tax forms. Because they said, we took financial literacy, we still don't know how to do our taxes. I'm throwing that out there. Maybe it needs to go through different channels on a different agenda item. I don't know. But just to put a bug in your ear that feedback came from our students. They also said it's one of the most valuable classes that they take in high school, and they really appreciate the skills that they are getting in class. So both of those, I'm just gonna throw out since we have you here. Thank you.
Perfect. I will give that feedback to our specialist that's working on that. Thank you.
Right.
I taught financial literacy and did that 3-year taxes. Anyway,
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very popular opinion I've heard as well. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Jones, let's proceed.
Next section, or next slide, please. So here's the data and statistics spend plan, very small amount of carry forward. Remember, we're presenting amounts above $100,000. So the 245 is broken out below into the 3 blue boxes. Any questions or concerns with the proposed data and statistics spend plan for $245,000? Okay.
Looks
Next
good.
slide. Okay, next slide, please. Here's the financial operations spend plan of the 2,000,009,158 for your review. Blue boxes represent the amounts that make up the 2,000,009,158 for financial operations, and you see the plan summary. I won't read it word for word. One thing I'll call out on this is, if you recall yesterday, the board did approve the finance committee's recommendation from last month for the $750,000 for LEA Financial Systems. So prioritized by the board. Part of this 2,000,009,158 will be used for that, now that the board has directed or supported the finance committee recommendations. Call that blue box out too.
And did you have specific things on the 239,000 that when you said return to board budget that you have that targeted for?
Yeah, I believe that would go into your discretionary account. But Sue, do you know that by chance? If that's where that 239,158 will go exactly, precisely? No.
Yeah, yes, I believe so.
Yeah, that ends up in your balance in your discretionary account.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, no questions.
Okay, next slide. Next section. Okay, so indirect cost pool spend plan. We identified in excess of 401,213. This is probably the best example where we get resulting surpluses from the indirect cost pool because of vacancy savings. You recall the ICP is used to pay for positions, mostly in finance and IT, that help support the whole of the agency. So, it's the restricted and unrestricted rates that we can charge to specific grants determined by the Department of Education with us as part of the negotiation process. So this is how the projects, the 401,213 is made up with the 140, the 100, and then the 161 would be put into your discussion. You can back to you.
Okay, seeing no questions, looks good.
Okay, next slide. Okay, here's the internal audit spend plan. This is Chief Audit Executive Davis. She's available here too to speak to it. We identified 128,776 of total carry forward. Her projects are broken up, or the sections projects are broken up below in the blue boxes. Anybody have any questions for Chief Audit Executive Davis?
I like the incentive idea, whatever we need to do to keep great people. Good. Okay, I don't see any questions.
Okay, next. Deputy Superintendent Stallings policy and communication budget, or the policy and communication budget, 1,919,764. Upper right-hand corner, projects are broken out in the blue boxes for your review. Most of it looks going towards data governance. So that would be Director Chalice. So UPAC.
And this UPAC is for an additional investigator that would be on a time limited basis.
Is
I don't-
Ben here?
I don't think Ben's here. We'll maybe have to talk to him about that
I'm not
later.
sure who's here from, or if anybody's here.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Vice
I'll,
Chair-
I do believe that, but I'll check with them. I do believe that is the answer, that it's a yes, to you. But
Okay.
I'll check,
Okay,
you know. And this does tie in too, you know, that they do need additional support. I
Yeah.
believe that there's one critical FTE that's identified in their business, or I'm sorry, the request for funding, the request
Okay.
for, yeah.
I see a question from Vice Chair Davis and then from
Oh.
Board Member Straight.
On the hiring of the legislative fellow, what is that, like an intern from the university? Is that a teacher fellow that's doing a 6-week contracted extra time, or what does, from the teacher fellows group, why does it say a legislative fellow? What is a fellow? Is that an intern?
Yeah, my understanding is, you know, each year as we go into the legislative session, we hire a intern, right? And that's what that money is for the intern. I don't believe it's I mean, I guess it could be a, you know, potentially a future teacher or anything, but yeah, typically it's a university student that serves as an intern. is my
And are they
understanding.
hired for just 6 weeks?
No, I think we've done it longer than 6 weeks before. I would have to check though, if that's just the intent, is it, you know, it would be budgeted for just 6 weeks, but I think for the bulk of the time, it's just 6 weeks, but maybe they, you know, it might be a little longer or a little less depending on their availability because of school and things like that, but I can check on that. But yeah, that's what we budget for. It's just, you know, the 6 weeks of the session. Does that help, Madam Chair?
Yes, it looks like Chief of Staff Young might also have additional
Oh, okay.
information.
Yeah, you can correct me.
Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
So thank you for the question. It is a little bit longer than that. We usually like them to start with us in January, just so that they have an opportunity to get, you know, acclimated to our office, as well as, you know the folks that they're going to be working with. And then actually, we usually keep them until the end of the month of March, just because they're also really helpful as we put together a lot of the legislative outcomes materials, including the bill book and others. So that's kind of the scope of work related to that. And we've had different fellows from different universities. We don't have an exclusive partnership with one. And that's been really fun to get to choose the best person who's really interested in education.
Quick follow-up, Chair.
Of course.
How many hours per week are they working?
So that is also going to be dependent on the individual fellow and their other roles and responsibilities. We have had fellows that do serve in more of a full-time capacity because they've been released from coursework or are in a course that allows them to count that time towards their educational outcomes. That's not the case with every fellow. And so we really do try and meet the individual's needs in terms of giving them roles and responsibilities that align with the time they have allowed to spend in the experience.
That's great. I would just say it would be great to see fellows from the education departments who are going to become teachers. So they start learning, not just, you know, poli-sci maybe majors, but people who really need to start understanding education law and implementing it in their own classrooms. Just
Yeah,
a thought. Thank
I'll
you.
just share that we have had pre-teachers before serve in those fellowships. There's one in particular who comes to mind. And as a part of that, it really was incredible. And I will say though, it did present an interesting kind of career branch for that individual where they were committed to going into the classroom and yet saw and were offered opportunities in policy. Ultimately, that individual decided to go serve in the classroom. But we agree, having folks who are interested in serving our kids and being a part of our system are the best folks to have.
Great. Hey, super.
Okay.
Oh,
Next
Vice Chair
slide.
Davis, do you have another one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Okay, next slide, please. This is student support services, 4,968,071 blue boxes for the projects that we're proposing to the committee for your review. Any questions or concerns on these?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay, next slide. The teaching and learning spend plan, 4,054,770 unencumbered. Here's what they're proposing the projects be for that funding.
Vice Chair Davis?
Just on the previous slide, I was just gonna say, just a little more detail on those.
Yeah.
Not that we need to talk about them right now, but for next year when we go through this process, if there is at least like a sentence or two, it would help give us a better idea of which questions are pertinent to which areas.
Yeah, the bullet points on some of the other ones have been helpful too, just to see a quick blurb about. I agree. If you
Okay.
could pass that along.
Yeah, what we can do is if you make the recommendation, we can update this slide for when the board reviews it next month.
That would be
That one.
excellent.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make note of that. Okay, let's see. Where were we? Yeah, okay, so any questions or concerns with the teaching and learning proposed spend plan? Okay,
No, good.
okay, next slide. And that's it for the sections. There, if there's other realized balances above $100,000, we'll bring those to the committee as well. I mean, we've covered the bulk of the balances in the sections or across the sections, so I don't anticipate that happening, but I do just want to put that condition and caveat out there that most of the time we cover everything in just one meeting. But if, you know, I'd just like to offer to you, Chair Norton, that, you know, we can bring this agenda item back if there's another section or something that has another proposal.
Okay, thank you. That would be much appreciated if it becomes necessary. All right. At this point, I do see Chief of Staff Young, and so let's return back to our action item 2.2, the measuring and results of appropriation for specific programs.
Ma'am,
Yes.
we may, I think we still need to address the motion, the proposed motion on this.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, there is a proposed motion. The recommended action is that the committee recommends that the board approves the spend plan for the unencumbered state fiscal year 2024 carried forward balances. Are there any questions or comments to this? All right, let's go ahead and please vote. Okay, that passes unanimously with board member Bogus and Moss absent. Thank you all for the assist on that. And now we can return to Deputy Superintendent. Sorry, good morning. Chief of Staff Young.
Great, thank you, Chair. So Chief of Staff Sarah Young, I appreciate the opportunity to be for you today to bring up the measuring the results of appropriations for specific programs update. Cami, if you'd like, I'm more than happy to share my screen for this item. Excellent, thank you. Let me go ahead and bring it up. So just as a reminder of where we ended as Finance Committee in our last conversation, you had the opportunity to go through and review what staff recommendations were for programs that we wanted to advance into the process of drafting their ROI logic model. So the reason that those were brought forward was mainly because they were deemed as urgent because they had a legislative need related to the program that the board may be considering either through external legislation or as part of an internal board funding request, which I believe you'll be reviewing this afternoon. So as a part of that, because I know that time is very limited here for the purposes of discussion, I'm going to make the recommendation based on guidance from Chair Norton that for each of the programs that we're going to bring forward, we are going to be looking explicitly at question or slide 4, so policy questions for the board. So just as a friendly reminder, the other information is there and available that presents kind of an overview of the program, the problem statement, resources, core strategies, short-term outcomes, and then performance measure alignment. In addition to that, we have a placeholder related to the dashboards that our financial operations team are building out for each program. And then we do have a third slide that speaks to the USBE staff role in terms of supporting the program and how, if the board has already determined, those efforts align with the oversight framework through the rule-based efforts. So all of that is available. And again, our staff are happy to take feedback on each of those items. But what I'm going to do is try and facilitate us to jump through each of the programs, specifically focusing on slide 4, which are then policy questions for the board. This is where staff can have the opportunity to explain some of these recommendations at your request and provide you some additional information so that if you are interested, you can provide action steps and guidance to staff on what our next steps could be to support taking action in some of these areas. Does that sound like a good plan, Chair Norton?
It certainly does.
Okay, excellent. So first up, as you can see on the screen, we do have our Beverly Taylor Sorensen program that is bringing forward a couple of policy considerations that the board may consider. So with the chair's support, I'd like to turn it over to Lori, who is our lead for BTSA.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lori.
Thank you, Sarah. Lori Bayevsky, Fine Arts Coordinator and BTS Arts Program Coordinator as well. And the main consideration is to do a board rule change to the existing rule, which is linked on this slide, to include a second distribution to the current uniform amount. And so as clarification, the current board rule, we have determined a uniform amount that goes out to each of the LEAs interested in the program. And then any remainder that we have left over goes for supplies and materials. And so this request is really to, instead of doing a distribution immediately for supplies and materials, before we do that, doing a second tranche, a second distribution to more equitably distribute the remaining funds towards salaries. I'll just, one clarification and one justification for this is based on the feedback that we've received from the field. And what we're seeing is, and there's multiple links on this slide that show that some of our larger LEAs who have the longest investment in the program are also paying the majority of the freight and for their BTS Arts educators. And so we've taken a deep dive with a steering committee to look at a more sustainable model. We think that the current model, if it's only one distribution, we're at risk of probably losing, potentially losing some of our longest supporters of the program. And so we've gotten, anyhow, I'll stop there and see if there's questions. Yeah, and we think with this distribution, just tweaking the board rules slightly to create a second distribution, that the uniform amount as it stands, the new statute as it stands is really workable. And most of the field has agreed from those that we've identified.
I see a question from Vice Chair Davis. Go ahead.
I remember studying this more in depth and thinking, okay, this makes a lot of sense. And I'm just trying to remember the details now. But on the second distribution, the initial distribution is sort of a set uniform amount across the board. And then from what is left over from that amount, that would go to those serving the most students.
No,
Am I remembering that correctly?
so the link in the second paragraph explains how distributed it is. So, yes, so the distributions, first of all, would happen simultaneously, and the remaining appropriated funds are allocated to all LEA's unfunded costs uniformly. And so it would be an equitable second distribution as well.
And when you say uniformly, or it was uniformly, are you saying that all LEAs received the same amount and now you want to do it possibly by a per student served kind of model, or what? Give me a little more detail on that.
Actually, that's something that there's many ways to slice and dice that. So it could be that, it could be the number of students served. It could be, what we have initially suggested is proportionally the remaining unfunded costs that are being borne by the LEAs. Yes.
May I ask Chair a follow-up?
Go ahead. Yes.
Is that above there's 20% required the LEAs have to contribute, correct? So would that be above the 20%, or did that go away in the last legislation?
Thank you, Board Member Davis. That actually is gone. That's completely gone.
Okay.
So there is no required match anymore. And the suggested tweak to the board rule is actually creating a percentile where the first distribution would be a 75% distribution of the actual FTE cost. And then the second distribution would be the remaining costs. And if you look at that Excel chart, which is in the third paragraph, what we see is that it equals out what is essentially a match. So it addresses that everybody has a little skin in the game, and the distribution ranges from about the minimum that anybody would pay would be 12%, and the maximum would be like 26.6%, using last year's numbers. And currently, the distribution is between zero. We have about 20 schools that don't pay anything this year, 20 schools that pay less than 5%. And then on the far end, we have schools paying upwards of close to 50% extra in their match. If that clarifies that.
Yeah, it's all coming back to me now.
I know, it's
Thank
a
you.
little complicated.
I did have one other question about materials, but I'll do it offline later because I know we got to get through the meeting, but thank you.
And I will do the same thing. I have some more questions on these distributions and materials as well. So we can take that offline. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and as record, one of the links is incorrect. The slideshow link is incorrect. So I'm going to put that slideshow in the chat, and that can be updated into the, your information that you have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Norton, just a process question. So what we can do is we can document these requests for action and address them comprehensively at the end, or we can do it at the end of each program. What is your preference?
Let's do those comprehensively at the end, and see how that works.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, so our next program, sorry, just shifting around a few toolbars. We have the CTE add-on. So again, this is their comprehensive logic model that they have related to the services of the program with the additional state funding. This as well does have a few policy questions for the board, and I will call out does align with one of the pending discussions for legislative funding requests that will be discussed by the board this afternoon. So we have Wendy Morton here with us from the CTE program, and Wendy, at the chair's direction, we can ask you to give an overview of the recommendations.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you. Good morning. Wendy Martin, CTE coordinator. On this slide here, what you can see is CTE is currently facing large amount of growth. Student interest has continued to grow throughout the state and participation in the programs. And so year over year, we're seeing large increases in students participating. And so the things that we decided to include in our policies for the board to consider are related to that growth and also related to the business case that you guys will discuss later today. So the first piece really is around the business case. So one of the things to consider is whether or not you're going to support that business case and request that we continue forward with those. One of those items that options we've listed there for all of you. The other piece is in our statute, we have some language that requires CTE to fund growth of LEAs. So when we get our allocation, we're required to fund LEA growth in CTE programs. And but there isn't any additional language in that rule that then obligates the legislature to fund that growth for CTE to allocate out. So essentially each year, if there's growth in LEAs for CTE programs, the funds that we receive are just sort of divided if we don't receive a correlating growth from the legislature in that given year. The other piece is considering FTE for the program. That would be a USBE staff FTE request. We currently do not have FTE to support the funds that flow through to LEAs that oversees these funds, and which are in the previous, some of that information is in the previous slide. So it's one of those things that we've been doing as a department, but for many years, but doesn't necessarily have an FTE associated with it. And we've been having to cover that with funds that we have, and in some cases splitting that with comparable responsibilities with federal funds. So somebody who has a comparable responsibility has been doing a lot of that work. And then also in our board rule a few years ago, we updated the board rule. And at that time, there was an unrestricted indirect cost rate that was determined to be added to the rule. One of the things that has been proposed here at the request of LEAs is that we consider a change to make that the unrestricted rate. So more of those program dollars flow through to the classroom supply, consumable supplies and materials and equipment that CTE needs. And so really, as we went through and decided for things for the board to consider, we focused in areas that align with our business case, and then a couple requests, or at least one request from LEAs.
Vice Chair Davis has a question, and then I have a question.
Okay.
Sandy, looks like you're on mute.
Thanks, Director Morton. I'm looking at the last bullet, which is the changing board rule R277-911. I thought I heard the opposite of what I read. So could you just clarify for me? I thought I heard you say that they requested changing it from restricted to unrestricted. And in the bullet, it says changing from unrestricted to restricted.
Okay, so I probably said it backwards then. I apologize. What you're reading in the bullet is correct. In the rule, it is listed as the unrestricted indirect cost rate, and the request from LEAs is to move it to the restricted rate.
Okay, may I follow up, Chair?
Please.
Sorry, I'm just trying to remember, because it seems like a year ago, this turned into a big brouhaha when we talked about this, and I'm just
did.
trying to remember all the pieces to that puzzle.
So there are some, so we had a business administrator come and provide some public comment on the topic. And that business administrator was not in favor of the restricted rate. So I wouldn't say that unanimously every LEA would agree, but we have a majority of LEAs asking for the restricted rate. And so that's why we've added that as an option for you to consider.
Can I follow up one more time?
You bet, because you're asking the same questions that I was going to ask. So go right ahead.
Because one came to do public comment, but several of us got emails. So
Okay.
Can you help us understand who is requesting the restricted indirect cost rate, and why are they requesting it? Like, what would be the benefit to them or to our students in general to do that instead of unrestricted?
So because the unrestricted rate is so high, and there's certain types of expenditures that the unrestricted cost rate can be spent on, those I would call them direct costs to the program, become less when you're buying, less is available when you use the unrestricted rate compared to the restricted rate. So when we, some of it is coming from program staff. We have some LEAs that in their financial office, they're using the unrestricted rate and then supplementing the program with additional funds from their unrestricted funds. And we have in some cases where they're happy with the unrestricted rate. So we have kind of a mixture. If you wanted specific LEAs that are asking directly for this, I will have to go back and get those specific names.
Oh, may I follow up, Chair?
You bet.
Yes.
Oh, I was just kind of wondering if it in general was like small LEAs, it benefits, or big
It's
LEAs,
a
or if it's just a
mixture.
mix.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have to end and move on, but I mean, would it be problematic for auditing or what have you to allow them to continue to choose whether they're using the restricted indirect cost rate or the unrestricted rate?
So somebody in the finance office will probably have to answer that, but my understanding is once the program is coded, and because we have that in rule, that it is a certain rate, that is an automatically, that's automatically determined for the LEA and what they will then use for that program.
That's correct. Each year we go through a process of making sure that the rates are clear with the LEUs and what they can charge direct to them.
So it's just a preference then. Everyone right now is coded for unrestricted, but some want the restricted because they'll save money.
It doesn't necessarily make them save money, but it allows them to then use those program dollars directly for the program rather than the indirect cost pool.
And it's help me understand, like if I wanted to buy like for my auto mechanics program, a car lift or some big expense, that's what if I remember right, that had some part of this, that they, they had money to run the program, but they never had enough money to buy some of these big items that you need in CTE if they were in restricted. Am I right? Help me remember what they can buy with restricted and what they cannot buy.
So the restricted rate and the unrestricted rate don't really limit the type of items they can buy with program money. And maybe, I don't know who would be the best person, honestly, to describe the indirect cost pool, but it is not my area of expertise. I understand a little bit of it. And so, but as far as like program money, yes, we may find that if they want to buy a lift for an automotive program, it's a couple $100,000 or more, depending on what type of equipment they're buying. And so they either have to save the money for a couple years to buy that, and so they have carry forward balances that they're moving, or they then spend that out of program money. And if there's not enough, then the school district would have to try and find the money from other sources. But it's my understanding that those types of things expenditures would not come out of the indirect cost pool.
Okay, Cindy, do you have another follow-up question?
So if we move this to the indirect cost pool, they can only use the monies to pay like salaries for CTE, not materials. Would that be inaccurate?
So they pay salaries now out of the CTE add-on funds for teachers in CTE. So some of the funds that they receive that are add-on go towards salaries currently, that they're not restricted from spending money on salaries out of that money.
So the monies that we're talking about in the rule change, are those just materials monies or are those also salary monies?
So it would be things like their finance staff and their IT staff and their power bills, their utilities. Like it's all of those types of expenditures that are agency-wide that are hard to divide up by program, that they work with USBE to negotiate this rate. And so the add-on dollars that they get are direct for the CTE program specifically. And so the indirect cost rate comes out of that off the top.
And when you say rate, do you mean cost? Please forgive my ignorance.
A percentage. So it's a percentage of the funds that they're allocated each year. So maybe it's like, for example, a restricted rate might be around 5% and an unrestricted rate might be around 12% or 15%. So depending on the program depends on whether they're using an unrestricted or a restricted rate for those funds to come off the top of the program before they or as they use the funds during the school year.
So it would be decreasing flexibility to move from an unrestricted rate to a restricted indirect cost rate.
Flexibility in the unrestricted funds, yes. it wouldn't change flexibility for the CT add-on funds. For the indirect cost pool funds, it would reduce the number of indirect cost funds that they could take off the top of CT add-on funds.
And
So-
at this point, this is a topic that would not be legislatively driven. And I want to go to Board Member Straight. And then I think, this is still a great conversation and one that needs to happen, but it's the things that we need to be talking about today are those things that we need to address if they are tied to legislative processes. So let's put this one on the back burner for the board rule. Let's go to Board Member Straight, and then we can move from there.
Chair, I was just wondering if it would be appropriate, it may not be, to get some insight from I think we have several superintendents in our meeting, don't we? Would that be inappropriate to get some comment? There was a comment made in the chat.
No, that would be appropriate. If we've got people that are available, Superintendent Willis, would you mind just giving us some thoughts on this while you're here?
So I didn't prepare anything for this conversation, but just my understanding of it, your indirect costs are covering things that aren't typically being coded specifically to the program. And so if we have a lower indirect cost rate with the restricted rate, that means that we can put more of our CTE money towards CTE programs, but technically those CTE programs have higher indirect costs than our other programs. So as far as accounting for for reality, technically, I think those indirect cost rates should technically be higher. We also, in our district personally, and I don't know what the situation is in other districts, but sometimes it's painful when you're wheeling in, $100,000 equipment into the shops, and then you're telling the English teacher they can't buy $200 worth of books. And so, that's a little bit painful, and CT is a totally different animal, but it's a program that has specific funding, whereas other of our instructional programs don't have individual funding for them. And so I think where they are causing more indirect costs, they're pulling more power, they have more square footage that they're using that requires more custodial work, et cetera. They have more grant programs that require more administrative paperwork. I would say they cause more indirect costs than other programs, and therefore I would think they should have the higher indirect cost rate, but I'm pretty new to this conversation, and so I don't want to disrupt too much what's been vetted by people who know more than I do.
That's important, and thank you very much. And I think that was a good call, Board Member Straight, to bring in those who are making these budgets work every day. And when we get ready to address this, if this is one of the choices that we choose to take, that it would be most definitely important to bring in our superintendents for their expertise. And, they're the ones that end up having to make the hard choices in the end. Vice Chair Davis.
I'm just so are you advocating to move the rule from unrestricted to indirect cost?
I am not advocating.
No, sorry, I was asking our guest.
Oh,
Sorry, Chair, I need to ask you if we can ask our guest.
well, we can get a real quick opinion. We do need to move on, especially because this is not a legislative request. This is something that's going to be later on. So that's why I think we need to move on to some of these other slides that we have left to talk about. Okay. All right, let's do that. Chief of Staff Young, please.
Okay, thank you. The next program that we have for you to consider is School Land Trust Program. Again, we have the traditional information available to you in their model. Specifically for this one, we do have a policy question for the board. This is a little different, so I just want to give some context that yes, we recognize as your staff, it is a little bit different. Where they are seeking policy action that would actually allow them to address an FTE need. Now, traditionally, we include all FTE needs in the critical USBE case, but because this one is specific to a program that would require a policy action related to it, it was recommended to us by both legislative leaders and others that we approach it through this lane. So with that, we do have Director Paula Plant here who can speak to it. But I did just want to highlight that this is a bit different and that we've taken that step based on recommendations from legislative experts.
Thank you, Paula Plant. I'm the director of the School Children's Trust. I'll try to go through these. I think they're pretty straightforward. The first one is something we have tried to do over the 25 years of the program, to look back every 5 or 6 years and look at the many requirements that tend to be added to school community councils. We have lots of people who say, oh, that's a great job for the school community council, let's have them do that. Or the councils ought to be doing this other thing. And so the Trust Advisory Committee that advises the board over the coming year will look at each section of code that involves the program and the 2 board rules, and look at them to say, are these things needed for them to accomplish their responsibilities? And then we would come back to you. Probably there will be some code changes and subsequently rule changes, hopefully that might minimize and streamline some of the responsibilities and requirements of council. So that's a work in progress for the Trust Advisory Committee. And you would see that at probably a year from now. The second item is the one that Sarah has just explained. And we have secured a sponsor, and some legislation is being drafted. What the legislation basically does is indicates the requirements for our team that have been listed in other sections of code but become our responsibility without any additional funding. And so the text in the change will just simply be identifying the things that we are responsible for that have not been listed in our section of the code. Hopefully that would then trigger a fiscal note, and we'd be able to get some additional help on our team. That's the second one. The third one is sort of a dream, but I participated on a working group with Deputy Superintendent Darren Nielsen a while ago that was looking at a common needs assessment. And it's my understanding, I think I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that the decision was made to work on a common needs assessment at the LEA level first before moving to a school level. And I think the LEA level project is continuing. At some point in time, I believe the thought process of a school having a common needs assessment that a council could look at, it would have the data to back up why the school has identified those items as their greatest academic need. And it would be a better starting place for a council to be able to make better decisions. We do see from time to time when a council has gone through the process and prepared a plan, and then the principal changes, and there's an amendment submitted to the plan that takes the takes the plan in a completely different direction. And I'm not judging, because I think sometimes that probably is a good thing. You have a new set of eyes, right, on what's happening. However, if you have a common needs assessment that is driving the work, I think the needs would stay the same, if that's making sense at all. And I've also sat on councils where I find that sometimes the people who are the most eloquent, as opposed to decisions being made based on the data, are sometimes where the decisions end up happening. So that's just a dream of mine. I hope at some point in time that will actually happen.
Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, we will move to our next logic model. So this is going to be a series of 3 different models that are all related to the same program and yet are represented in 3 separate funding sources. And so because each of those funding sources has a slightly different audience that the program serves, we do have them separated in terms of recognizing those differences across how the funding is distributed. So the first one we're going to address is our statewide online education program that is specific to home and private school student participation. So you can see again the traditional logic model along with the program support and administration. I will note that for program support and administration that we do have that as a collective across all 3 programs, just noting that our experts at the agency serve all 3 programs. For policy questions for the board, for this, we do have Quinn Kellis with us from Teaching and Learning, who will be able to speak to this slide. So at the chair's direction, I would turn it over to Quinn.
Okay, Quinn, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Quinn Kellis. I am the lead administrator for the State Online Education Program, and we love it when people ask questions about SOEP because we just want to share all the information there is about it. This one is a little bit unique because we're talking about the home and private. You may or may not recall that during the last legislative session, the HB 247 passed that says by April 1st of 2025, home and private will be transferred out of SOEP and into the hands of a private contractor. So we are currently in the process of developing an RFP for securing that contractor who will assume the management of the home and private students for online coursework. That being said, here are a couple of items that we are seeing. Some of this is manifest in the recent SOEP audit that was released a couple of weeks ago. So the first one is a hybrid environments that requires physical attendance versus the statutory intent of enabling students to earn high school or middle school credits through completion of publicly funded courses. Again, I'm not sure how much appetite the board has to get into legislative changes when this will be shifting away from SOEP. But what we have is in a hybrid environment, we have students who are sitting in a classroom with a live teacher, and this is for private students, and that environment is just like any brick and mortar school where students have a regular schedule. They go through their coursework during their daily schedule, but they are also enrolled in SOEP courses. For each of their courses that they're sitting in class for, they are enrolled in a matching SOEP course. So there's some question about the hybrid nature. If the intent of SOEP is that it's an online program, should statute allow for hybrid environments. The other recommendation, acceptability provider payment to educators. So we have one particular provider where for private students, the provider, which is ASU Prep Global, receives their allocation of funds, just like any of our other providers. And then they reallocate those funds back to the classroom teachers to contribute to their salaries. So there's a question of whether or not that is acceptable when you have an entire school who is enrolled in SOEP, and then there's a split payment, I guess, a shared funding from the private school budget and SOEP budget. So those are just a couple of things. It's going to look very different in 6 months. And so this is a looming question. There are plenty of other policies, both statutory and in rule, that will need to be considered as we extract out the home and private students from SOEP, and that we hand off that responsibility to the provider. So those will be forthcoming. We are in the process of drafting an entire rule that will accomplish that task. The challenge, unlike Utah Fits All, where there was ample legislation to drive the vision and the direction of rule changes, there's woefully little legislation to inform the vision of what this contractor type environment will look like. So it's possible that there will be some recommendations for rule change, and then as other eyes are put upon those recommendations, that the vision is clarified. So that's all I have for this one.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions.
Excellent. Oh,
Sorry, Vice Chair Davis, go ahead.
I think it's just probably important to note here that data from audits outside of our agency have shown that in the past, our agency has been found to have far fewer, if any, findings than private vendors who get involved in a middle management of overseeing things like these public monies that are going to private purposes. So the bigger issue that I have, however, then is if there become problems with those vendors, they come back to us and we get kind of a hand slap, so to speak. So I'm just asking, as you move forward with these rule drafts and contracts, I mean, the biggest thing would be to request from the legislature exactly what involvement do you want from us? And if you want us to help oversee the vendor and you want public accountability for public dollars, then make it explicit what we need to be doing. And if you want it to be kind of more of a free-for-all, then indicate that as well in the code so that everybody's clear on what's expected. Thank you.
Thank you.
great. Thank you. Okay, we will move to our next SOEP program. So this is going to be the statewide online education program for public school student participation. So again, we have the resources, strategies, short-term outcomes, and performance measures outlined, a placeholder for the financial dashboards, the same roles and responsibilities that are present in in all of the SOEP logic models. And then we have a different set of policy questions for the board, which again, I believe Quinn Callis would be best to address at the discretion of our chair.
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I will just continue where I left off now with all of our public school students. Well, another population of our public school students. Here, what we are looking at is state funding for students to complete credit. We have course fees for every student who's enrolled in the SOEP program. Those fees are then remitted to the providers who manage the coursework. And the recognition here is for a primary LEA, that's a student's home LEA, their home district or charter, to incorporate the SOEP credits into their membership, meaning that they can allow the SOEP course to be part of their daily schedule. They can do this already. There are some who will say, if you're going to take an SOEP course, you have to be off campus, you can't be here. We would want every student to feel like they can remain on campus, whether they have 1 or 4 SOEP courses, and remain part of the school environment. Another bullet there is a 6-credit limit on SOEP enrollment. That's the current limit, unless it's determined that additional credits would be beneficial to the students, then they can be allowed to take more than 6 credits at a time. Another recommendation from the audit is that this be looked at. We are talking with one of the representatives on the education committee who is considering how to raise the bar for SOEP courses and for transcripts for students who have had SOEP courses, and there's some discussion about reducing that limit just so that the transcript isn't too overly rich with online course credits. There's a counter argument there that you have students in every different situation, and there are those who, whether for medical reasons or who knows, maybe they're pre-Olympic athletes who are training during the day and do their courses at other times where they need a full schedule for 6 credits. But that is one of the items being discussed. The other, an obligation to attend physical courses when an SOEP course is in membership. So on the opposite side, can an LEA require a student that if they're taking a course that they have to be on campus to take it, that they're monitored, they're supervised, and that adds to the integrity of the coursework that's being completed. Down at the bottom, there's a couple of recommendations. Code 53F4, 505, 6, and 7, those both say that an LEA can renegotiate fees with a provider. We have fees that are standard across the board for all of our providers based on each course. If an LEA can negotiate for a cheaper rate, they are welcome to do so. No provider is going to negotiate a cheaper rate than what they're getting through the SOEP program. So the question there is that code really necessary, and should it be repealed? And then youth in custody, youth in care. We believe that there is great opportunity for SOEP for these students. They are unique. They have different times where periods of time where they are needing some alternative options for coursework, but we feel like we could provide a great service there. And that's all I have for this one.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on this one. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Okay, we have one more in the suite of SOEP. So let me bring that one up. Sorry, my little toolbar just jumps on down. Here we go. So this is again the statewide online education program that is specific to our small public high school supports. So you may remember that the legislature took action to recognize that the needs of some of our smaller, more rural high schools may have additional opportunities to engage with SOEP to serve their students based on some of the constraints that are typical in those small schools related to number of teachers certified in specific areas and the types of courses and pathways they're able to offer based on the thresholds for course enrollment to make it financially feasible. So as a part of that, again, we have all of the standard logic model components. And for this, again, our expert is going to be Quinn Kellis to speak to some policy considerations at the discretion of the chair.
Go ahead, Quinn.
Thank you very much. It's still me, Quinn Kellis, lead administrator for the SOEP program. Changes to rural code that the board would recognize for small school funding. The first one, the board may wish to recognize whether requesting a widening of the statutory definition program for eligibility of small schools to include middle school students. Right now, small school funding can only be used for students enrolled, secondary level students and schools. So if you have a student in a middle school, even though they're taking high school courses, those courses cannot be eligible for small school funding. And so the thought here is that any coursework that is done for high schools, whether the student is in high school or middle school, it's based on the courses and not on the student enrollment. The next one, the board may wish to study whether funding is adequate. Right now, we have carry forward funding from 2 years ago. Last year, the legislature did not allocate funding for small schools. And so there's some lack of confidence from LEAs in promoting this for students to register for courses if they know that they're not going to qualify for small school funding. When they know that they are going to qualify for small school funding, there's a substantially higher rate of support for enrolling their students in an SOEP. So the additional funding, or actually the funding, it is somewhat unpredictable from year to year on whether the legislature is going to allocate funding for it. And it would be great to have a permanent funding source so that there's that confidence. The last one, the board wished to consider a single SIS system for SOEP, LEAs, providers. This would be incredibly helpful so that we can help students with their enrollment process. Right now, they have to first register with USBE and the SOEP platform, and then register again with their respective provider based on the courses that they choose. If we had a single student information system, it would make it so that students would have ready access to all the courses from all the providers in one enrollment system. And that's all I have for this one.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions at this time.
Excellent. So we just have one more draft logic model for you. And this was actually at the request of board member Straight as part of when we were prioritizing programs to take action with. There was a request related to kindergarten. And so we are bringing that forward in terms of identifying both resources, core strategies, outcomes, and performance measure alignment. Again, placeholder related to the financial data. USBE program and support does speak to how we incorporate that into some of our existing teaching positions. This particular program does not have an explicit rule as has been categorized by the oversight framework. And so for this, we do have a policy recommendation for the board. And our expert for this is going to be Christine Elegante from our teaching and learning section at the discretion of the chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. I'm Christine Elegante. I'm a K-3 literacy specialist. And this thing before you, this question for the board to consider is something that's come up a few times in the field. And over the last 2 years, we've had more phone calls come in about this very question. And it deals with those students who start kindergarten in other states. We have about 15 states that have a later kindergarten start date than we do here in Utah. And then typically they are moving in the middle of the year. And then there's no exception in our state code to allow those kids to continue on with kindergarten. So basically, unless they're a military family, if they're a military family, there is an exception, but that would be it. So I did thought maybe the board should consider amending the state code to allow for exceptions based on previous enrollment and attendance of a student in another state's public system. Parents were pretty passionate. My child's been attending full day kindergarten out of state. They are halfway through their year. And now you're telling me that they cannot continue on. Although, the advice that we do give them is to work with their LEA when their child is eligible to start kindergarten and maybe look at advancing and moving straight to first grade. Doesn't really help them out for the year that they're in, that the half year or whatever they're missing, and that would just really require some things that if that's something that the board wanted to consider on changing the state code, just some things that would need to be done on probably through a board rule or something about requirements and protocols set in place to do that. So that's all I have for you.
Great, thank you. Board Member Straight, does that address the questions or thoughts you had on kindergarten? And I'm not seeing him on right now, so. Oh, go ahead. Did you have any additional information you requested or that you would like to hear about, Board Member Straight, on the kindergarten presentation? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, and my apologies. I did say kindergarten was our last one, but we do actually have one more that I seem to have closed in my series of tabs. So before we conclude, we do have one more program for you. That is the school-based mental health screening related to a program that was passed a couple of years ago by our legislative leaders. So again, you can see both problem statement, the traditional logic model elements, a placeholder for financial data. We do have USBE personnel and some actions being taken related to the fiscal administrative requirements of this program. This as well does have some pending legislative potential code changes that may be beneficial based on some of the feedback our team has received. And so I believe we have Tara Kay with us to be able to speak to this at the discretion of the chair.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tara Kay Bombley, school-based mental health specialist. Yeah, we discussed some things as a team. So one thing to note is just there has been some concern that school staff like secretaries and aides are being asked to do the screening. So either conducting the screening or assessing the screening after it's been done. And so we are just wondering, our kind of suggestion is, would you consider screening to be done by qualified personnel as it's described in Code 53F2415? So in that code, it just references like school counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, or other social workers or other psychologists that have a license to do. That's our recommended of who should be doing the screening. In code, it doesn't specify who does the screening other than just they have to do an annual training that we provide that kind of just goes over some of the grant requirements and some of the screening program requirements. The other thing that we would like you to consider is just knowledge and training of how to administer and interpret results of specific screeners may not be common practice. Would the board consider those performing screening be required to be trained on the screening tools that are chosen by LEAs? So there is a wide variety of screening tools out there. And so that's one thing that's not currently in board role or statute, is just kind of, are they trained on the specific tool? And the LEAs get to pick which tool that they get to use. It looks, do you want me to finish, or shall we talk about this?
I see a question
Vice Chair
from
Davis.
Vice Chair Davis.
Who would, if we were to require the training, who would pay for the training? Who would pay for the people doing the training, and then who would pay the employees to need to go through extra training, or how does that funding model, how does that look? And is that a legislative funding request, or how's, if you could just tell us about the details of that?
Yeah, so some of the screening tools do have some free training that goes along with their screening tool. Others are offered by DHHS. They have some free training on screening tools. So some of them are free, some of them may not be. So it kind of is dependent on the LEA and what screening tool that they're choosing to use. Does that answer your question, Vice Chair Davis? Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, halfway. I'm just wondering, what the time commitment is of employees that would need to be trained. And would they be compensated for any extra time, or is that just something that would roll into their daily duties?
I think that could be up for discussion of, the funding could be used for part of that training. It is used for like salaries and material costs. So that's something that if you wanted to consider with the training, then currently it's not specified of whether that's covering them to be trained on a screener.
And last quick follow-up, you're requesting to go back to a competitive grant process. Is it currently in code distributed per student?
So just this past year in legislation, HB 413 changed it to, it used to be competitive, they changed it to a formula grant that is based on student membership daily count.
Okay, it's just a little hard to go back to a grant because we've had a lot of LEAs, big and small, asking to go to formula distributions because it requires actually less administrative work and paperwork and follow through on their part. So it's a little tricky fine line in the current milieu, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, so if it's okay, Sarah, I'll just, or Chair Norton, I just was going to expand on that last bullet point topic, and then if you guys have further questions. So the way the grant was ran before was a competitive grant, and there wasn't a ton of applicants. A lot of some of our bigger LEAs. So one thing to understand is we have our screening program, and then we have the screening grant. So the LEAs have to say if they're participating, and then those LEAs that are participating in the screening program are the LEAs that we open that grant up to. So historically, as you can see in some of the data, we've had like 20 LEAs that were approved last year for that grant. And there's not a ton that apply for that grant. And so when we switched to formula, some of the feedback that I've gotten over the last few months is just they were receiving a larger chunk of money to kind of supply those needs for that screening grant. Whereas some of the bigger LEAs are already doing screening without that funding, prior funding being, it either wasn't worth it to them to apply for that competitive process. And so, yes, it has been changed to that formula grant. And if you look in the prior slides, there's 90% that is formula, and then 10% is going to be a competitive process that is for LEAs that exhaust all funds. So there is that 10% that they can ask more for. And we've had a lot of LEAs reach out about that 10% because prior they were getting a much larger funding amount, like charters that did apply in the past were getting a lot more funding. And then this year they got a very limited amount based on their student membership count. And so they are, requesting kind of those additional funds to meet their screening needs from that 10%.
Thank you. Okay, not Deputy Superintendent Jones, Chief of Staff Young.
Okay,
Is-
so that does bring us to the end of this presentation. So what I have for you as a committee to consider, I'm just going to bring up the motion sheet quickly. And as a part of that, what we've done is we've captured the recommendations by each program for Finance Committee's consideration to help in terms of prioritization. The language that is bolded under each program is specific to legislative related action, whereas non-bolded is specific to USBE agency level action. So all of these have been drafted and we would defer to you as chair if there is any of these that you would like to take action on.
Committee members, are there any of these you'd like to take action on today? Or that you feel are pressing right now? Or do you think this is something that we could consider for our next meeting?
Well, Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I think there are several I could take action on today. It's 11:18. I don't know what your thoughts are as a chair about the timing of the meeting, but then if we just kick the can down the road, are we gonna have to go through this whole meeting again? Should we make some motions that impact legislative asks now? I guess I'm asking you, Chair, your preference of timing of things.
Well, for timing of the matter, we have some items on our agenda today that we need to get to today. And that's why I'm concerned. And I also don't want to do anything just rapidly to push it through that we have not had time to do the background work that I think we probably need to do at this point. I may be wrong, and I can see Deputy Superintendent Jones' hand is up. Go ahead, Deputy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I do recommend that if you want to spend some additional time on this very important agenda item that you do. The next item for the action item, so we have one more action item after this. But, I feel like even if you were to spend more time on this, making motions, we could still get to that action item. Then the important information item is the NES update, because that has implications on what we're doing with the legislature, with the field. That the rest of them, though, can actually be moved to next month, right? I do want to recognize an employee, though, for his recent awarding of his CMA. But other than that, it's really up to you, Chair Norton and Vice Chair Davis and Board Member Straight. Subject to Chief of Staff Young's input on this. This is something that we can bring back as an action item next month. To your point, Chair Norton, if you want more time, if the committee members want more time, but we don't want to certainly rush you into making motions or action items. If you don't feel like you're ready to do that, we could do that next month. But because I think, the implication wise is that there's still a little bit of time before the session, but we would need, if you are going to make recommendations for policy changes, get those in front of the board, obviously prior to the legislative session. Can we check in with Chief of Staff Young on my input and see if she's good with it, bad with it?
Before we do that, can we just scroll through this list on the screen? I am very, very concerned. There's a big list here and we are not going to get through. If this is all we did, we are not going to get through this in an hour. Maybe we could take one of these areas and discuss that right now and then go on to the rest of our business. But you know, I don't want to just be throwing things through. It's too important. These are very important matters. And so I feel like we need to, you know, spend some time with them, and not just spend time with them. I think we've all been looking through these papers a lot. We need to discuss them and, you know, have our discussion back and forth time. So if Member Straight or Member Davis, if there's one area that you feel like you would like to bring up a motion, let's do that. But I think otherwise, the rest of it is either going to need to be a special meeting that we hold or that we set aside our October meeting for this and this alone.
That's an option, ma'am. We've done that in the past as we've had special finance committee meetings to focus on particular items for action. So that's another option we have. We can support that.
Okay. Vice Chair Davis.
Well, I'm comfortable moving all of them forward today with waiting on the CTE, the bottom bullet of the CTE and the bottom bullet of the student mental health. I think those we need to do some more exploration on. But I don't know how the other two, there are only three of us, so I don't know how the other two of you feel, if that's too broad of a move to full board at this point for you. And if so, I can withdraw the motion.
And I think I've already made my thoughts pretty transparent. What are you thinking, Member Straight?
Well, we only have barely a quorum. And I don't think we move anything. Obviously, we can't move anything forward. Doesn't have full support of all three of us. My indication is I think the two that I had the most concern with have already been mentioned by Vice Chair Davis. So I would be fine with moving some forward, but I could also go say no. Let's just have a special meeting. I'm both places.
Okay, I think let's go ahead and have a special meeting, see if we can get that approved, and have a special meeting when we can get all five of us and we can get these particular areas and focus in on them and deal with that separately. It's a big chunk and it's important and it's a lot of money. Or a lot of not money, a lot of changes and requests to be made. So let's go ahead, Chief of Staff.
For the group's consideration, I have two items that may be more pressing than others, just based on the fact that we've already received outreach from legislators and we're trying to, as staff, get board feedback before we go too far in that process. One of them is going to be this school land trust component in terms of considering those administrative needs. And this stems out of an audit that was completed for school land trust. And so I'm just curious if that would be something, specifically the bolded language, that the finance committee might be willing to consider related to allowing our staff to continue to engage in those conversations so that we can make sure it aligns with the needs of the office.
I can see one of them highlighted. What was the other?
So that the first one is school land trust. The second one I'll address separately because it's a different program, if that's okay. There's just two that you might.
I can move that one if
You want
you're.
to move that one? Okay.
I move that the committee recommends that the board consider taking the following actions related to the school land trust program. Directing staff to consider and make recommendations to remove requirements through legislative code changes and rule changes to streamline the responsibility of school community councils. And direct staff to work with the legislature to seek funding for an office specialist for school land trust. And why is the last crossed out?
I think she just wanted to do the direct staff, the middle one. Is
Oh,
that
I
correct?
think, yeah, I think we were just thinking the legislative one is the
Yeah,
one that's
just the
pressing, and we
legislative
could
one.
come back to the other two, but I'm comfortable with whatever the committee would like.
I mean, I'm comfortable moving the needs assessment, but as well as part of it, I mean, it makes sense.
Okay.
If you're
you make
not,
the-
if you're
make the
not,
motion-
Member Norton.
Make the motion however you will. I'm not going to be voting for.
Okay, let's, if you need more information on that one, let's take that piece off and just move the tops.
Okay.
So we don't have to take time to divide.
Okay,
So
so
that-
the motion
yeah.
before the board is that the committee recommends that the board consider taking the following actions related to the school land trust program. Directing staff to consider and make recommendations to remove requirements through legislative code changes and rule changes to streamline the responsibilities of school community councils, and direct staff to work with the legislature to seek funding for an office specialist for school land trust. Any questions or comments? Okay, board members, please vote.
Chair Norton, I'm going to abstain.
Okay. All right, so the vote passed with 3 in favor and Member Bogus abstaining.
Okay, excellent. The one other one that I just want to flag, only because it will be on your discussion list this afternoon, is just going to be related to the CTE add-on component. So not for a decision necessarily today for Finance Committee, but you will be considering a funding request case that does ask for an increase related to this program to address some of the needs that we heard from Wendy Morton here today, as well as the FTE related to the administration of that program. So not for a vote necessarily, but because it is coming to full board, I just wanted to flag that alignment for you this afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to do that and to bring these forward today.
Sorry, Chair, are those time sensitive? You mentioned 2 were time sensitive.
So CTE, because it is coming before you this afternoon, if the Finance Committee wanted to provide a recommendation, this would be your opportunity before deciding if it was board supported or not in this afternoon's conversation. So it doesn't require you to take action. You're certainly willing to think about what's been shared and have that information as part of your considerations for action this afternoon. I just wanted to flag that the board will be considering that full case as part of your afternoon agenda items.
Just point of information
Go ahead.
is, will the board already be considering all of this? Is this already on the agenda minus what's going through committee? Or could we move a portion of this forward minus the last bullet to discuss in our special meeting? Could we move the other pieces forward?
So that is correct. So the items that are in bold are going to be considered as part of the legislative funding request this afternoon. So you would certainly be willing to provide at least the finance committee's input related to those items ahead of the board's discussion to be able to share in that larger board discussion setting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be important. I'd be willing to move that, Chair, if you're willing to entertain it.
But it's already on the agenda, right? Is that correct, Sarah?
That is-
And so I don't know that it's even necessary for us to take, other than to just state our opinion right now. Is that what you're thinking, Cindy?
Yeah,
Well, so if I may, Madam Chair, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't request a policy change in the request for appropriation form, right? You know how Angie does the policy changes in front of the full board on that too. So I think what Sarah's saying is that when you go to the business case today, the request for appropriation, this is congruent with that as if it would have been a policy change too. Is that right, Chief of Staff Young?
That is correct. I can go, some of our funding requests do require a policy change as well, and we've captured that in the documents that are going before the board. The reason that we put those pieces together is because if we didn't receive additional funding, the policy change wouldn't be necessary. So as opposed to having them presented separately in Deputy Stallings' overview, we include those into kind of a single request so that the board provides direction for both the pursuit of funding and subsequent policy changes.
Board Member Straight?
I have kind of a chicken and egg question. But I need some information as well. So one of the pieces of information, how much time is put aside right now towards the legislative request?
I haven't been provided that information. I think that is still under consideration of board leadership related to this afternoon.
Right. But my experience tells me that we'll get bogged down. We could easily get bogged down in this business case. I think if we talk through all these points and everyone makes a comment, I mean, I'm just guesstimating 20 to 40 minutes just for one legislative request. And
then
we really need that time. I mean, I just and I look at the others on the list. We have 15 total. Even if you go 20 minutes each, that's 3 an hour, that's 5 hours. You know, but yet these legislative requests are super important. But our ranking becomes ultimately important. And so we have these business cases out there. And I just don't know how we're going to, I mean, we completely lost them yesterday. We have hours of business that were supposed to be yesterday, happened today. And I don't think there's the will of the board to stay late into the evening. And so I don't know that it matters if we send this forward. I'm willing to send it forward, minus what's already been crossed right now. But yeah,
it's already on the agenda. So the question is, would an opinion from this committee help increase that speed of the conversation or decrease the speed of the conversation?
I don't think it matters.
If it doesn't matter, I'm just gonna move it, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, let's move. So
I move that the committee recommends that the board consider taking the following actions related to the CTE add-on program. One, supporting the CTE add-on increased business case in alignment with the legislative funding request. Two, supporting additional clarifying language for the Utah Code 53F-2-311-4B for growth identified in the statute to be allocated to USBE. And three, request FTE to administer and support the program.
Okay, any questions or concerns?
And that's with the understanding that the last bullet will be brought back for discussion in the special meeting.
Okay. All right, go ahead and please vote. Okay, looks like we have 3 votes in favor. Are you abstaining, Member Bogus?
No, ma'am, I'm just finding my things in the new Zoom that downloaded
Okay,
today.
you bet.
Thank you.
And 1 opposed with Board Member Bogus in opposition. So that passes.
Excellent. Thank you for your time today. And I will just await additional information about a special meeting to discuss the other items.
Okay, thank you. All right, we next move on to action item 2.4, state fiscal year 2024 discretionary carry forward balance status and approval for use. Deputy Superintendent Jones will take that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could pull up the report, the discretionary funds reports in the backups. Okay, so now that, we closed year end, fiscal year 2024, we've identified, funds, that are available or put into the board's discretionary fund account. If you could make it just a little bit bigger for me, Cami, sorry, my eyes are so. So if you go, just want to orient committee members and the public to the upper right-hand corner of the report, and you can see what our initial going into FY25 based on the closing activities of 24, our initial carried forward balances are across the following: state funds, general funds, FML stands for Federal Mineral Lease Funds, land exchange, and tax delay. We still do have some tax delay funds available. With that, then, if you will orient yourselves to the left side of the report and specifically the yellow highlighted areas of it, these are the items that we typically bring back to you for renewal. Well, bring back to the finance committee to make recommendations to the board for renewal or continuation. And they are as follows: a contingency fund of $200,000, which is different from the next one, which is a legal contingency fund of $250,000. As you all know, we recently, or within the last year, worked closely with DFCM to enhance our building security. It's made a very big difference, or good difference, in safety of our employees and safety of the public in and around the building. Recently, though, DFCM, they're under somewhat of a slight budget duress, and so they've asked not just us but other agencies, Cami can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, if we could help or increase funding towards ensuring that not only do we have building security available during the weekdays, but that we also can cover the building on the weekends. Because as you know, based on the location of our building, that's in an area that's highly trafficked over the weekends by different groups. And so having the weekend oversight of our building, the area in and around it is essential to safety leading into the work. Do we have an opportunity to pay the leases off on our state cars? This is, if this money were used, it's money that, or it would actually result in a cost savings to us. We can drill down on that further with you, but just that's the high level reason for asking now. The timing was good for payoff of the leases that we have on the state cards our staff use. We always have, so as you probably all know, basically all we're paying for in our building right now is operations and maintenance. DFCM does a good job of providing that ongoing sustainment or maintenance, if you will, but occasionally we do have a need for unforeseen repairs or updates or upgrades to the building that's not in the DFCM budget. So we always ask for somewhat of a set aside for what we have labeled facility needs for anything that comes up that we don't know or have identified, or the DFCM has identified in their budget to support our building. The superintendent discretionary fund, this is varied from year to year. We've gone between $100,000 to $150,000 this year. We're only requesting $75,000 to go into our discretionary fund. Here's where, or what I mentioned earlier, right? So if you recall, the board said prioritize carry forward funding balances for $3.26 million to go to the districts for the administrative, small districts for the administrative portions or needs that they've had year in, year out. This is, tied in subject to what you'll get a lot of great information on next with the NEST formula that's being proposed. So as I mentioned in the earlier action item or thing, part of that 3.26 million would come from the surplus in the assessment and accountability. We're recommending that the remaining balance come out of this. And you see that amount there as well. So Madam Chair, if I could pause there and check in with Cammie on any additional information she wants to provide to you on building security vehicle lease payoff of facility needs. Could we do that, please?
Yes. Cammie.
Thank you. I don't have anything additional to add. If there's any questions, I'm happy to address those.
And I am not seeing any questions.
So if we could go to the motion, Cammie, or the board memo.
Hey, do we have someone who'd like to make the motion?
I'll do that.
Yeah, these are all
Thank you.
broken out for you, in the yellow highlighted areas. So there is a type. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, they're all.
So the recommended action, the
Yes.
Finance Committee recommends that the board approve continuing a contingency fund of 200,000 and a legal contingency fund of 250,000. Do I need to read the rest of this? Okay, I do.
I don't.
The Finance Committee recommends that the board approve using 395,000 of state discretionary funds for providing funding to the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, 75,000, continuing on-site and revolving security guard service at the USBE office, 180,000, paying off older agency vehicle leases to realign them with the replacement cycle, 40,000, and allocating a building operations budget for various replacement and repairs. Example given: broken security cameras, paint and patch, update conference room furniture, etc. For the 2025 fiscal year, 100,000.
Hey, committee members, you got any questions on this? Comments?
Norton.
Yes.
Chair Norton, sorry. Point of
Cammie?
order.
Oh, go ahead.
Remember, I
Scott,
don't
Cammie.
know if I can do that. I think we did miss the 900 and
That's
plus.
what I was gonna say too.
Yeah.
That
So-
one's not on there.
Yeah, so we need to add that, ma'am. If you go back to the report and you see that. So what I recommend is we go with board member Straight's motion plus the 900 and that number.
The 970,000.
Correct, yes, sir.
and small district-based funding for administrative costs of $970,676.71.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, are there any, would you like to speak to your motion? Member Straight.
I wore myself out reading it.
And then you came back and did some more. So that was awesome. Go team. All right. Any questions? All right. Committee members, please vote. Okay, looks like that passes unanimously, 4-0 with Board Member Moss absent. All right. Superintendent Jones, does that conclude that item?
Yes, ma'am. And that concludes all our action items. I do recommend we go to item number 2.5 for the NEST update. As you know, Superintendent Kobe Willis is here with us as well. Mr. Frost and Mr. Yu.
Okay, so let's turn the time over to Mr. Yuri to introduce the topic and introduce Superintendent Willis.
Yeah, good morning, Sam Yuri, School Finance Director. Happy to have Kobe Willis, the Superintendent of Paiute School District with us, as well as Del Frost, our Minimum School Program Administrator. As you know, just a quick background, there was a WestEd study done on economies of scale, looking at several issues as we've moved along, trying to, provide our rural schools with the most resources possible in the best way possible. There was a bill that came out last legislative session, HB 533. It was not funded and did not pass, but Kobe Willis and many other stakeholders in the small district community have been working on some updates furthering that work, and Kobe's here to present that, and we'll turn the time right over to Kobe.
Thank you.
Am I able to put the slides up that should have been attached? Or if somebody else wants to put those up, that would be awesome. And then in the interest of time, we'll just skip down to let's go all the way to the 6th slide there. So we established a committee, superintendents and business administrators, to look at House Bill 533. And the first thing we did was meet with some of the USBE staff and the LFA and a couple of legislators that were involved, and we wanted to identify what are the major concerns with the necessarily existent small schools program as it stands that we would want to try and address. And so we got several pages of notes, but these are what we summarized those concerns to be. That the definition of what is a necessarily existent small school was vague, subjective, that the formula didn't properly incentivize consolidation, that there wasn't a method to determine if the amount of funding that the school was receiving was adequate, that it was more complex than it needed to be, outdated, inflexible, and then that the district level component that Charlie talked a little bit about, there was a feeling that component was too small. The WestEd study indicated that all of the cost efficiencies are realized at the district level, and actually recommended that the formula be entirely district size based formula, which there was a lot of pushback on that, and every district feels like there needs to be a school level component to that, but agreed that the district level component needed to be bigger. So then if you scroll down to the next slide there, we drafted 4 recommendations. We modeled a lot of different things, went through a lot of different spreadsheets after that. So the big one that solves several concerns is just redefining a more accurate definition of what a necessarily existent small school is. Then we changed it from 5 curves to 2 essentially pyramids or 2 tables that hopefully simplifies it a little bit. Then we still want to use the WestEd study to do the district-based portion of the formula, almost exactly how it was written in HB 533. And then some of the flexibility that is needed for isolated schools we can gain by just not restricting the school-based portion to a specific school. Essentially, if you have multiple nest schools and one has a young staff low on the salary schedule, another has experienced staff higher on the salary schedule, the funding may not match the cost or the needs, and so allowing districts the flexibility to move between necessarily existent small schools solve some of those issues. If you go down to the next one, we kind of go into kind of what that redefining of a necessarily existent small school means. And feel free to cut me off anytime if you're feeling like this is taking too long and you need to be wrapping up. I'm going to try and be as quick as possible.
You're great, Cody.
All right. I'm going to try and be done before noon here. So,
Okay.
So our current definition is based first on average daily membership, then on this school bus travel time concept. And because more than half of our nest schools right now don't fit that school bus travel time, and that school bus travel time's kind of an arbitrary, hard to calculate because of where buses have to go. They don't usually make straight lines from home to the school. So because that's always been kind of an arbitrary number, there's a lot of exemptions to it. And so trying to remove some of that subjectivity in the formula, we came up with this proposed definition. Other states have been using the NCES codes, those National Center for Education Statistics codes, the locale code for how rural an area is. There's 12 different codes, all the way from metropolitan city to rural remote area. And we used those codes as part of the definition of a necessarily existent small school. So in verbiage, we could say a necessarily existent small school is just a school that the legislature has a compelling interest in maintaining, despite not having sufficient economies of scale to maintain with other local and state funding formulas. So getting into the weeds of what that means, we drew the line at NCES locale code of 33, and then we pushed 10 miles off of NCES locale codes of 21 or lower, and I'll explain why in just a second for that. And then removed all schools that have overlapping school boundaries. And so is not an online school, specialty school, technical school, alternative school, or charter school. And then the last point there may not be needed, as it's a variable of how the formula will work and maybe not necessarily part of the definition, but has an ADM of lower than 28 in an individual grade band for grade bands K through 6, and ADM lower than 126 in individual grade bands 7 through 12. So if you go to the next slide, kind of shows you why we have that little 10-mile thing there. So when we sorted all of the schools in Utah by NCES code and eliminated those with 32 or less, and then used the other definitions to narrow down, it still said the Coral Cliffs Elementary School still qualified as a necessarily existent small school, which, as you can see, Coral Cliffs Elementary School is right in the middle of what is considered to be a small city, the NCES code 13, there in Santa Clara. And so it had a NCES code of 41, rural fringe, bordering right up against a small city. And so essentially, when we added the criteria of a necessarily existent small school needs to be at least 10 miles from a large suburb, that eliminated Coral Cliffs as well as a couple other examples. The next two slides are two other examples of schools that probably shouldn't qualify, that did qualify without that criteria. So the little gold miner's daughter school out there at the ski resort, 8 miles from large suburb, and then that Cedar Valley school that's 6 miles from the large suburb there, and also Eagle Mountain. That's a lower NCES code. So those are kind of the exemptions, I guess, or what the 3 schools that were essentially eliminated with that little provision of the 10 miles. If you go down to the slide 12 there, this is what we'd be replacing. So we'd be replacing the 5 curves currently with essentially 2 pyramids. If you consider how many grade bands are allowable in each of the current curves and divide that by the maximum number of students that are allowed in that curve, essentially a 6th grade band secondary school, the blue curve, you can have up to 100 students in a grade band, or 600 total students. And then likewise for the others down to the elementary, you phase out at 160 students. So if you have a 7 grade band elementary school, then you can have essentially 22.8 elementary students per grade band ADM. Those can create kind of some, Dale Frost used the word wonky, so apparently that's an acceptable word. I'll use wonky results when there's an incentive, when the grade band for minimum for some of those secondary curves are higher or lower than the others, it creates some weird incentives. So like Pingwich Middle School is right across the street from Pingwich High School. There's an incentive to keep the 2 schools separate because the grade band minimum for middle school is higher, and you're benefiting from both the blue curve and the green curve, essentially maximizing both. Whereas where they're right next to each other, you'd be better to just be incentivize that being a 7-12 high school. Likewise, it incentivizes putting your 5th and 6th grade in the middle school, because a 5th through 8th grade middle school is a 4 grade band secondary school, the same as a 9th through 12th grade high school. So the 9th through 12th grade high school is being funded at the same rate as a 5th through 8th middle school, when clearly the necessary funds to fund those 2 schools would be significantly different. And so there is an adequacy issue with that. So simplifying it, met in the middle with the red curve of the 125 students, essentially simplifying the curve into a pyramid, and pulling those 4 curves for secondary into just 1 pyramid there with a minimum base. Then if you want to go to the next one, next slide there, this kind of shows the results. This is what everybody wants to see. Obviously, is the goal is that none of the districts would lose funding. When we initially did this, the only district that was going to lose funding that there was maybe some significant concern for was Emory. Dale Frost was able to update this chart with by putting in ADM data instead of October 1. The chart on the slide was created using October 1 data. When we updated it with ADM and a more current year, Emory became a winner in it, and so that was no longer a concern. Essentially how much each district gets specifically in numbers, I believe, is one of the other attachments that you have, so you can see that specifically. And then the next slide was just the 4th recommendation of not restricting the school-based portion of the funding to a specific school to allow some flexibility there. So those are our 4 recommendations. One of the last slides, I believe, or the very last slide, just addresses how each of those 6 concerns that we initially had were addressed with those 4 recommendations. We still have some technical details to kind of work out, and I'm hoping to meet with Dale Frost a little later today and kind of talk about a couple of those little specifics. But so far, we feel like the process is going pretty well, and we'd love to have USB support. So that's where we're at.
Thank you so much. And that sounds like just a few words, but it comes with a really great, sincere thanks from me and all the students that are affected by this. And that was a huge load that you guys took on. And I wondered if it was even going to be possible. And here you have put those minds together and got a really great chunk of this taken care of. Board members.
I did want to add real fast, sorry, just that the HB 533 was going to be asking for roughly 25 million in ongoing with some additional for one-time funding. One of the goals of our committee was to do it for significantly less, to make the change, but do it for significantly less. The current proposed recommendations, when we first drafted it, it was going to be around 12 million, and I think now it's around 14. And if you add in the one-time money that has been being, or the small district base funding, if you factor in the fact that part of that's been being funded from one-time money for the last 4 years since COVID, that would bring the total ongoing cost to around 16-17 million, I believe is where it would total right now. So anyway, that was a big part of it, is that we wanted it to be cheaper than last year's proposal. So
Well, and see, that's great news too. We always like less. All right. Are there any questions or comments from the board members? Or from Mr. Frost or Mr. Uri? Okay. Not seeing any then. We can go on to recognition. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Yes, ma'am. At your direction, if Cody Wright will turn on his camera.
Yes.
So you can see him. In the backups is recognition that Cody achieved his CMA.
Scott, Cody actually, excuse me, Cody actually had to leave at noon. So he just hopped off. We can move this to next month, or go ahead and recognize him.
Okay, is that okay, Karen Norton? I didn't know Cody had to leave, sorry.
Of course.
Okay, next up then is recognition of the school land trust distribution. If we could pull that up real quick, the FY25, yes, right in there. This is huge. You can see, I mean, it's just really right off the top, the bottom line up front there. Will be funded for FY25 as of August. This is a huge accomplishment, and we would like to share this quick thank you video to celebrate. We won't do the video though, in the interest of time, if that's okay, Chair Norton. But I do encourage the public and you as committee members to view that quick video. So any questions about this recognition?
Oh, that's wonderful. So
Okay.
wonderful. Great.
Chair Norton, at your direction, I do recommend, in the interest of time, that we go ahead and move the updates to the to the USIMS and the Utah grants to next month, to deeper dive on that. Is that okay? If we
It is. We do, I think, have a request for or at least, a
Right.
request for information, data information. So, but yeah, that's fine. We can move that to
Okay,
October
yeah,
if that
so-
works
so
for them.
Can we, if we go up to the presentations on the UMA and, or on the Utah grants and the USIMS, which agenda item is out?
Showing it on this agenda view, I'm not sure why.
Yeah,
They should be right here.
that's what I thought. So we'll go ahead and move those. We'll plan on in October doing the deeper dives on the Utah grants and the USIPs. So in your direction, ma'am, if we could segue to agenda item number 2.7. My
Yes.
understanding is that a committee member has a request for information. So if we could get to that first, then I'll update these other ones here after that.
Okay, Board Member Bogus.
Thank you, ma'am. I was wondering if our staff could collect data and information as to how our schools on a 4-day waiver are using their federal lunch program funds. And maybe lay that out for us in a way. There's been a lot of chaos in other states, and I just would like to see how we're doing it and ensure that we're doing it right. And if necessary, I can send you those articles, but I think that's something that I would like to review as a board member to ensure that we are on the up and up in this state. Does that, did I articulate that in a manner that you understand what I'm asking for?
I do, and I'm Chair Norton, if I may.
Yes.
Yes, I do understand board member Bogus's request. My peers in other states, probably states that she's seen other articles into, have the same concerns. We'll get with CNP and programs and follow up on this. If we can't, for some reason it gets too complicated, we'll plan on following up with this as part of this item in the October Finance Committee, if that's okay with board member Bogus. But if we run into any questions or concerns, if we could contact her directly for clarification or anything, that would be great. So, but we'll plan on following up on it, her request in the October Finance Committee.
Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if we could just open up the other two follow-ups for this. All this really is that it's been a perpetual request of Finance Committee members to ensure that we're tracking on our negotiations on our indirect cost pool percentage, restricted, unrestricted rates. The Department of Education sent us a letter saying they needed an extension, or that they're extending it. So we don't. So what that means is, the so what of that is that we continue to use the FY24 percentage. Thank you. And that's it, ma'am.
Okay. Very good. Any other business? Cami?
We do have one more agenda item, number 8. I don't know if we wanted to do that one or.
Scott, do you want to do the quarterly report?
Yeah, I can try. I'm not sure I can get it done in 4 minutes, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
Tammy, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the slides. So the first thing that you always want to know is how the schools are spending their money. So if you'll go to the next slide, one of our team went to Navigator Point at Academy last year. You'll see the goal that they have listed there was about reading. And they spent their money for professional development on reading and also $300 for books. The next 3 slides are really the very best part of this presentation, because the first grade students wrote notes about the books that they received and how much they loved them. So those are the next 3 slides. So the next thing I want to just give us a quick summary about the money that's been generated for the trust over the past year. The $70 million, sorry, is what the Trust Lands Administration forwarded to the school fund. You'll see the numbers there for the permanent fund, which shows growth of about $356 million, I think. Of course, that's market value, so it depends on the day. And then the final is the distribution to schools, which is an average, you can see there, of about $157 per student. But just a reminder that the first year of this program, it was $10 a student. So if you'll go to the next slide, this is just an invitation. In the past, there has been some interest from committee members to attend the CITFO Summit. So that's the fund office has a summit every year. The past 2 years, their summit has been scheduled right on top of the board meeting, so no one was able to attend. I just want to let you know that it is the same week as the board meeting this time, but not the same dates. There is no cost to attend. It would just be the cost for an overnight stay if you choose to do that. If anyone is interested in attending, please just let me know and I will forward your information so that you can be included in the invitation. So the next thing is just a little bit of an update on what's happening with the constitutional amendment to increase the revenue coming from the permanent fund to public schools. We're waiting right now for it to be numbered. It's supposed to be numbered 60 days before the election, so that's pretty soon. And then I'd just like to show you some of the materials that have been prepared to help people understand what this means. We have been attending conferences and PTA events where we have distributed these materials to try and help people understand what it is. We have not been advocating that they vote for it because that's not our role, but it is our role to provide information. So the next slide, Cami, would show. So this is small, but it's a one-page sheet that has been prepared for each school district and also for each legislator that indicates the distribution, the amount of money the school received this year, and then how much money they would have received if the 5% cap is in place. That helps them to understand what this means to them personally. The next slide, Cami, is just to show another information piece that we have been sharing. And if you'll go to the next one, this just is indicating a video that Treasurer Oaks prepared that also explains what it is. It's not set up to play, but just for your awareness that he's helping and supporting and getting that information out. The last item has to do with the legislative audit that initiated with SITLA. It ended up being divided into 2 reports. So there was a report on the land office and then a report on the other 3 entities in the trust system. There were not a lot of recommendations relating to the fund office or the school land trust program. The focus was really on the land trust protection and advocacy office and an indication that there needed to be changes or the legislature could consider eliminating that office. And so we're working on that and have decided that what we need to do is, instead of trying to make something that hasn't worked as anticipated, we ought to go back to the drawing board and pull all of the stakeholders together and talk to them about what is it that beneficiaries need, what can this office do in adding value. I did have some concerns because one of the recommendations was that they just put those responsibilities back under our section, and I'm not sure that we are positioned to really do what the audit had recommended. And I will give you further information when I know more what will be happening as a result of that audit. And I think that's all, unless you have any questions. I made it. It's 12:15.
Woohoo! That was a lot of good information. And I love the good news part. It's great.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm not seeing any questions from any of our board members. So I think that's A-OK-O. And unless there's any questions or comments from board or Cami or Deputy Superintendent Jones, we can take a final motion.
Yeah,
Go
just
ahead.
for an administrative point, man, we'll be reaching out to committee members to see availability for a special meeting next week. Because that's my understanding is we do want to have the special finance committee meeting before the October board meeting to go back through those, or not go back through, but go through those, right? Is that? Okay. Okay, we'll be reaching out for the.
Okay, for a date, we'll be reaching out.
Can I just ask a question? Are we going to be addressing in the special meeting the all of those requests that we had questions on? Or are we also going to redo the carry forward plans? Or should we vote on the carry forward plans today?
We did vote on the carry forward plans, did we not?
And we didn't.
Well, we did.
We did.
Oh, we
Yeah.
did? Oh, I was just told we didn't.
Yeah,
Well,
I thought we
I
did.
thought you proposed one and then Brent Straight proposed one.
Those were not the carry forward plans. Those were that was
Oh, the carry forward
second
plans. are
agenda
the-
item.
Yep, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if we voted on the first carry forward, the agency plans.
Yeah, Jeremy?
We did. That was voted on and it passed with the three of you. Move that forward.
Oh, my goodness. Well, my bad.
Yeah, no, well, so we had, and I actually said, hey, we have to go back to do the action item, if you recall, and you did.
Yeah.
The three of you did.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thank you.
All right. So, are the three of you available for a meeting next week? Be looking at your schedules. I'll reach out to you. We'll coordinate with staff and see how that all looks, and then we'll get something set in stone. Okay?
Chair Norton,
Yes.
is Monday an option?
I don't think anybody's really had a chance to look at that part yet, so.
Oh, I meant actually as in terms of publication. Because we would need to decide today if Monday were on our radar.
That would be, I mean, it's, anything's an option for you, all of you as board members, right? But since it's Friday, if we were trying to do something on Monday, the noticing piece of it might be the challenge.
Yeah, I would prefer to stay away from Monday just because we kind of need to look over this information a little more and maybe ask some questions next Monday. And I don't know that we're all up to working all weekend to do that. So I think we'll wait until Monday to get this coordinated, and then we'll have it sometime between Tuesday and Friday.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody want to give me a final motion?
Would that be to move to adjourn the meeting?
That would be.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
All right.
Yahoo!
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, see you in 36 minutes. Bye, y'all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Cammie and Scott
Thanks for your patience.
and everybody.
Thank you.
Sarah and Dale.